make sure that before practice or throughout the week, just make sure everything's firing so that I don't put myself in a position like that.
Don't know any of those things, but I do know that like the idea of romance is kind of what makes me get out of bed in the morning.
That's right. The New Heights starter jackets, we're giving them out to a few lucky 92%ers. All right now.
Imagine this for a second. A roaring stadium, thousands of fans on their feet, the kind of noise that buzzes in your chest like electricity, cameras flashing, announcers shouting. And right in the middle of all that chaos, Travis Kelce suddenly stops, looks around, and drops to his knees. Not because he's hurt, not because he's exhausted, but because something hits him so hard emotionally that his body reacts before his brain even catches up. The clip goes viral instantly. Fans are screaming, reporters are losing their minds, and Swifties are zooming in on every pixel like FBI agents. But behind that emotional collapse, behind Travis falling to his knees in front of Taylor Swift, lies a reason almost nobody knows. A reason that goes way deeper than a touchdown, deeper than a moment of gratitude, deeper than anything that's been posted online. To understand why Travis did what he did, you have to go back a bit. For weeks, he'd been going through a level of pressure that even an FL elite athlete struggle to survive. Practice after practice, game after game, media interview after media interview. Everywhere he went, another question about Taylor, another rumor, another headline, another sports analyst calling him distracted. And the craziest part, Travis kept all of it inside. The jokes, the hate, the doubts, the pressure. He didn't clap back. He didn't complain. He didn't even let it show on his face. But that kind of weight doesn't just disappear. It builds quietly, constantly, until it snaps behind closed doors. Things were much heavier than fans realized. The Chiefs were struggling. Commentators were questioning Travis' dedication. Some even claimed he wasn't playing the same because he was busy being Taylor Swift's boyfriend. As if the guy wasn't already one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, as if his entire career hadn't been built on discipline and dominance. But people talked anyway. And talking turned into headlines, and headlines turned into pressure. Pressure he couldn't escape. And then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. A conversation Taylor had with him before the game. Something so simple, but so powerful, that it stuck with him the entire time he walked onto that field. Taylor looked him in the eyes and told him she didn't care about stats, touchdowns, or what anyone online said. She told him she was proud of him. She told him he didn't need to prove anything to her. And she told him she was there not as Taylor Swift the superstar, but as a woman who loved him for who he was when no one was watching. Those words hit him deeper than he expected. So he walks into that stadium with his heart already heavy, but also full. He plays the game of his life. Every yard, every catch, every hit, all of it felt like he was fighting more than just the opposing team. He was fighting every critic, every rumor, every headline. And the moment the final whistle blew, something inside him just snapped. But not in a bad way. In a release, the pressure, the noise, the expectations, everything he'd been carrying suddenly rushed out of him at once. He turns toward Taylor. She's standing there, smiling the way she does when she forgets the cameras exist. Her hands tucked into her jacket sleeves, her hair a little messy from the wind. Her eyes locked onto him like he's the only thing in the stadium. And that's when everything becomes too much for him to handle. He drops to his knees, not to worship her, not to grandstand for cameras, but because gratitude physically overwhelms him. Gratitude that she stuck by him, gratitude that she understood him, gratitude that despite everything the world threw at them, she still chose to show up. In that moment, Travis wasn't an NFL superstar. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a headline. He was just a man whose heart got hit harder than any tackle he'd ever taken. People later tried to say it was a dramatic gesture. Some said it was for publicity. Some tried to twist it into something fake. But they didn't see what really happened next. The quiet moment when Taylor rushed toward him, confused for a second, and then immediately understood. You can see it clearly if you slow down the footage. Her whole expression changes. It softens. She kneels down to his level, leans in, touches his shoulder, and whispers something to him. We don't know the exact words, but based on his reaction, it wasn't just comfort. It was connection. A private moment in a public space. A moment they both forgot millions of eyes were watching. Travis puts his forehead against her chest for a second. Just a second. But long enough for anyone paying close attention to see that this wasn't about drama. This was about emotional exhaustion meeting unconditional support. When he finally stands, he wipes his face. Taylor wipes her own eyes too, quickly, like she didn't want cameras catching it. He takes a deep breath. She squeezes his hand. And in that moment, everything else disappears. The fans, the noise, the cameras, it's just them. What people don't realize is that Taylor had been protecting him behind the scenes more than anyone can. She was checking comments about him so he didn't have to, telling her team to shut down hateful headlines, even talking to the Chiefs organization about giving him more breathing room from certain media obligations. But she did all of it quietly, never announcing it, never bragging, never making it about herself. Travis knew about some of it, but not all of it, at least not until that week. And when he found out the full extent of it, everything she'd been doing for him, everything she'd been shielding him from, that's when it hit him hardest. That's when he realized she wasn't just supporting him in public. She was supporting him in ways no one else could see, ways that mattered more than applause or fame. There was one more thing. Though, one thing that completely broke him emotionally, a voicemail Taylor left him the night before the game. In it, she told him she knew he was under pressure. She knew he wasn't okay. And she told him that if he ever felt like the world was too heavy, he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. She said, "You're not by yourself, okay? You have me." Those words were still echoing in his mind the moment he saw her after the game. And that's why his knees gave out. You can be the strongest man in the world, the biggest, the toughest, the most celebrated. But when someone gives you a kind of love you didn't know you needed, it hits you harder than anything else. And that's exactly what happened to Travis. When they finally walked off together, hand in hand, you could see the relief on his face. You could see the softness in Taylor's smile. They weren't acting. They weren't performing. They weren't trying to go viral. They were just two people who'd been through a storm, separately and together, finally finding a moment of calm. The truth is, Travis dropped to his knees not because Taylor is Taylor Swift, but because Taylor showed up when he needed her most, not as a superstar, but as a woman who cared about his heart more than his headlines. And in a world where everyone wants something from him, fame, attention, gossip, entertainment, she gave him something simple, something powerful, something rare. She gave him peace. Travis didn't talk about the moment for hours after it happened. Not to reporters, not to teammates, not even to the staff buzzing around him in the locker room. Everyone saw the clip. Everyone wanted answers. But he stayed quiet, silent, not in an awkward way, in a reflective way, like someone who had just lived through something bigger than the game itself. Something you don't explain in 5 seconds on live TV. Teammates kept asking him if he was okay. Trainers were checking him for injuries because they didn't understand what made him collapse like that. And the truth is, he didn't fully understand it either. All he knew was that when he saw Taylor, something inside him just let go. A wave of relief, love, exhaustion, gratitude, all hitting at once like a tidal wave. He'd spent so long being the strong one, the guy with the thick skin, the guy who jokes about everything, that he forgot what it felt like to truly feel safe around someone. When the locker room started clearing out, Travis finally grabbed his phone. Dozens of messages, hundreds of tags, his name trending, Taylor's name trending, Kelce nails for Swift trending, memes already flying around, fan edits already posted. The internet was doing what the internet always does. taking a private moment and turning it into public obsession. He stared at the screen for a long time, scrolling, processing, rewatching the clip from every possible angle. But then he stopped, put his phone face down. Because none of those comments captured the real reason behind the moment. None of them understood the internal war he'd been fighting. All he could think about was getting to Taylor. When he walked out of the locker room, she was waiting for him in a quiet hallway, away from cameras, away from security, away from screaming fans, just standing there, hoodie up, hands tucked in the pocket, trying not to draw attention. But she didn't have to try. The only person Travis could see was her. He walked straight toward her. And before he could say a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't a dramatic movie hug. It wasn't a celebrity moment. It was slow, gentle, patient, the kind of hug someone gives when they know you're holding in too much. And Travis, who is used to being the biggest guy in the room, leaned into her like he was trying to hide from the world. She whispered, "Hey, I'm here. It's okay. I'm right here." And for the second time that day, he felt his chest tighten. There's something about hearing calm words from the right person that hits different. He pulled her even closer and whispered back, "I don't know what happened out there." She gently pulled back enough to look him in the eyes and said, "You don't have to know. You just needed to let it out." She wasn't judging him. She wasn't confused. She understood him better than anyone expected she would. They stayed like that for a long moment. No noise, no spotlight, just two people breathing in sync because they finally found a quiet second to be real. When they finally let go, Taylor cupped his face with both hands and said something that hit him harder than any headline. "You don't always have to be the strong one." Travis swallowed, because for his entire life, he'd been told the opposite. As an athlete, you push through everything: pain, pressure, mistakes, injuries, expectations. But here was someone telling him he didn't need to perform strength for her. It was the first time anyone had said that to him in years. She told him she saw the stress he was hiding. She told him she noticed his late-night texts where he downplayed things. She noticed the way he changed the subject when conversation got too heavy. She noticed how he'd pretend he wasn't tired when she knew he was running on fumes. Other people saw confidence. She saw pressure. Other people saw perfection. She saw exhaustion. And then she admitted something that made him freeze for a second. She said, "I tried so hard not to worry, but I've seen that look before on myself." And suddenly, the moment made sense. Taylor knew exactly what burnout felt like. She'd lived through worse. She knew what it was like to be the center of a world that never stops demanding something from you. She knew what it was like to give everything you have and still have people say it wasn't enough. That's why she handled Travis with so much care. She wasn't guessing how he felt. She understood it personally. He didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who the world sees as untouchable, unreachable, perfect. But right there, she wasn't any of those things. She was just Taylor, a person who'd been broken before and was trying to protect him from breaking the same way. She asked him what triggered the emotional overload on the field. At first, he said he didn't know, but she waited, calm, patient, letting him think. And then he finally admitted everything: the pressure, the criticism, the expectations. And then seeing you there, it made me realize I wasn't carrying it alone. He told her about the sleepless nights, the mental exhaustion, the pressure to perform even when his body was screaming for rest, the comments tearing him apart, the narrative that he wasn't focused. All of it poured out like a confession he'd kept locked away too long. Taylor didn't interrupt once, not with a word, not even with a nod. She let him talk until he had nothing left. And when he finished, she said the one thing he didn't realize he needed to hear: "Thank you for telling me. You don't ever have to hide from me." That's the moment that changed everything. Because for the first time, he realized she wasn't asking for the version of him the world sees. She wanted the real version, the tired version, the stressed version, the overwhelmed version. She wanted all of him, not just the parts that fit into highlight reels. They started walking toward the exit together, slow and quiet. Every once in a while, Taylor would bump her shoulder into his gently, trying to make him smile. And it worked. For the first time all day, the weight lifted off his face. Not fully, but enough that she saw the spark she loved coming back. They reached the car, but neither of them got in yet. Instead, they leaned against the side of it, just talking about life, about pressure, about how crazy their world had become. And then Taylor said something that caught him completely off guard. "I know people think I'm the reason for your stress," she said softly. "But I promise I'm trying to be the reason you have peace too." He stared at her for a long second, and then he said, "You already are." She smiled, the small kind of smile that only shows up when someone hears something they needed deep in their soul. She reached out, interlocking her fingers with his, letting their hands rest on the cold metal of the car. "Then don't carry everything alone anymore," she said. That line, that one line, stayed with him for the rest of the night, because somewhere between the fame and the chaos, Travis had forgotten that he didn't have to be invincible, that he didn't have to pretend the noise didn't affect him, that he didn't have to fight every battle by himself. Taylor wasn't just cheering from the stands. She was holding his heart from somewhere much closer. When they finally got into the car, he reached for her hand first. Not out of habit, not out of romance, out of gratitude, out of realization, out of understanding. She squeezed back, like she was telling him without words that she wasn't going anywhere. The city lights passed by outside the window as they drove away. But inside the car, everything was calm, quiet, safe. Travis leaned his head back, breathing slowly for the first time that day. Taylor watched him for a moment, then rested her hand gently on his arm. A small gesture, but enough to tell him he could relax now. He didn't have to perform. He didn't have to pretend. The moment he dropped to his knees wasn't about the game. It wasn't about the cameras. It wasn't about creating a viral moment. It was about reaching the breaking point and finding someone who caught him before he hit the ground. The car ride back to the hotel was quiet, but not the uncomfortable kind of quiet. It was the kind that happens when people understand each other so deeply that they don't need words to fill the space. Travis stared out the window, watching city lights streak across the glass, reflecting like tiny meteors flying past. His body was tired, but his mind was finally starting to settle. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't replaying mistakes. He wasn't worrying about headlines. He wasn't thinking about what tomorrow's critics would say. All he was thinking about was the way Taylor held his hand like she was grounding him. She could sense he was deep in thought. Without looking at him, she whispered, "You're quiet." He turned his head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. "I'm just calm," he said, and she smiled softly, because she knew how rarely he ever got to feel calm anymore. When they arrived, the paparazzi were waiting. Of course they were. Flashes started firing the second the car slowed down. Reporters yelling questions, fans screaming, security scrambling. Travis immediately tensed up, instinctively stepping toward Taylor to shield her from the chaos. But she gently tugged his hand and whispered, "It's okay." They walked in together, moving as one, ignoring the noise around them. Once inside, away from the cameras, they finally exhaled. A staff member handed them key cards, and they headed to the elevator. The second the doors closed, Travis leaned back against the wall, letting out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Taylor stepped toward him, her fingertips brushing his chest lightly. "Long day," she murmured. He laughed quietly, a tired, almost broken laugh, and nodded. "Longest in a while." The elevator ride felt slow to slow, like time wanted them to sit in the moment a little longer. When the doors opened on their floor, they walked down the hallway together, still holding hands. There was something tender about the way he kept glancing at her, like he was checking to make sure she was really there. Inside the room, the door clicked shut behind them, muting the world completely. No crowd, no pressure, no noise, just the soft hum of the air conditioning and the faint glow of city lights through the window. Taylor took off her jacket and tossed it on the chair, then turned to see Travis sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, head lowered, not in sadness, in relief, in release. She walked over, stood in front of him, and lifted his chin so he'd look at her. "Talk to me," she whispered, and he did. He told her everything he'd been holding back, about the messages he didn't want her to see, about the comments that cut deeper than he admitted, about the pressure of carrying not just his performance, but the entire team's expectations. He told her how it felt to have the world question his relationship, his dedication, his identity, how people twisted every move, every gesture, every interview into something it wasn't. He told her how much he hated the idea of her thinking she was part of the stress, when in reality, she was the only thing holding him together some days. He didn't cry, but his voice cracked once, just once, and that was enough for Taylor to understand how close he'd been to breaking. She sat beside him, close enough that their knees touched, and leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm sorry you went through that alone," she whispered. He shook his head. "I didn't want you to worry." She lifted her head again, looking him dead in the eyes. "Travis, I worry because I care, not because you're weak, because you're human." He swallowed hard. Then she said something that made him freeze completely. "You don't have to protect me from your feelings." That sentence hit him like a punch in the chest. Not painful, but shocking. His whole life, his entire identity, had been built around protecting others, protecting the team, protecting the play, protecting the people he loved. But nobody had ever told him he was allowed to let someone protect him back. Taylor reached for his hand and held it between both of hers. "You show up for everyone else," she said softly. "Let someone show up for you too." He didn't respond right away. His throat felt tight, but he squeezed her hand, not hard, but with a kind of sincerity that spoke louder than words. After a while, Taylor kicked off her shoes and climbed up to sit near the pillows, patting the space beside her. "Come here," she said gently. He joined her, leaning back against the headboard, exhaling again as if the bed was the first safe place he'd touch all day. She rested her head on his chest, her hand lightly on his stomach, and they stayed like that for a while, to people breathing slowly, letting the silence heal what the day had broken. Eventually, she murmured, "Do you want to know something?" He looked down at her. "What?" She hesitated, then said, "I plan to talk to you after the game anyway. I knew you weren't okay. I could feel it." He frowned a little. "How?" She gave a tiny, shy smile. "Because you send shorter texts when you're overwhelmed, and you use less emojis." He stared at her for a second, and then laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that shakes your shoulders. She laughed too, and for the first time since he collapsed on the field, the tension finally broke completely. When the laughter faded, he kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Thank you." She looked up at him. "For what?" He breathed out slowly. "For being here, for seeing me, for everything." She studied his face for a moment, then traced a small circle on his chest with her finger. "You fell to your knees today because you hit a breaking point," she said softly. "But you stood back up because you're stronger than you think." He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He just listened. She shifted slightly so she could look him in the eyes again. "But next time," she said, "don't wait until you break. Just talk to me." He nodded. "I will." She raised an eyebrow. "Promise." He smiled. A real, warm, relaxed smile. "Promise." Later that night, when Taylor fell asleep with her head on his chest and her hand still resting over his heartbeat, Travis stayed awake just long enough to take it all in. The room was dark except for the glow of the city outside. The air was still, and for the first time in a long, long time, he felt okay. Not perfect, not fixed, but understood, supported, loved in a way that didn't demand anything back. He looked at her sleeping face, peaceful, soft, unbothered, and that's when he whispered the real reason he dropped to his knees. Words nobody heard but her, even in her sleep. You saved me today. He didn't mean saved from danger. He meant saved from himself, saved from the pressure, saved from the silence, saved from the weight he didn't know he was carrying until she lifted it. The next morning, the world would explode with rumors, theories, reaction videos, memes, and breakdowns of the moment. Reporters would swarm, headlines would exaggerate, fans would argue, critics would spin stories, but none of them would know the truth. None of them would understand why his knees gave out. None of them would understand the quiet conversations, the emotional release, the support behind the scenes, or the healing that happened away from cameras. Only they would, and that was enough, because the moment wasn't for the world, it was for her, and because of her. And as he finally drifted off to sleep, with Taylor wrapped around him and the chaos of the world far, far away, Travis Kelce understood something he hadn't said out loud yet. He didn't fall to his knees because he was weak. He fell because he finally felt safe enough to let go. Don't just watch the drama unfold. Be part of it. Subscribe to Celeb Gossip Snap now for your daily celebrity fix.